Hi, I'm Marilyn Chambers, and I've just finished making the most erotic motion picture ever made. It's called Insatiable. With me on the screen are the biggest names in the adult film world. Remember, Insatiable.
Hi, welcome to Light Camera Author. I'm Jim Juno. And if you were around in the early 70s, you did not have the internet to do you any favors. So if you wanted to see an adult film, you more or less had to go to the theater. And the theaters were not the best in shape. They were often dirty and it was a stigma attached to it until a person named Marilyn Chambers came on the scene. And her in the movie Behind the Green Door, along with the movies The Devil and Miss Jones and Deep Throat, starring Linda Lovelace, brought adult film into the mainstream. And there is a new book out now called Pure, The Sexual Revolution of Marilyn Chambers. And its author, Jared Stearns, joins us now. Welcome, Jared, to Light Camera Author.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Marilyn Chambers. Now, I had her daughter on the show once a
Oh,
while
you
back,
did?
McKenna Taylor. Yes.
Oh, okay, great.
And yeah, and a lot of people don't realize. Now, Marilyn Chambers passed away a few years ago, much too young, age 56.
Yeah.
But a lot of people remember her as an adult film actress, and she was.
Hmm.
That's no arguing there. But she was more than that. She had a business sense about her, didn't she?
She did, yeah. And I mean, in the book, I don't argue for or against pornography. You either like it or you don't, and that I'll leave that to the sociologists and other people who want to write about that. But the intention, or one of the intentions of the book, is to sort of dispel the notion that preconceived notions of what a porn star is. These days, adult actresses, the most notable of which in the past few years is Stormy Daniels. They do hundreds and hundreds of scenes and movies, and Marilyn only did five X-rated feature films, and but they were so big and she was so popular that it stuck with her, that label. There was no such thing as a porn star before Marilyn Chambers and Linda Lovelace. They created this whole new strain of celebrity. And I think people don't realize that because before them, there was no such thing as a porn star. And because they were the first, that label got attached to them. And but she was very savvy. She was very shrewd. She loved working, she loved entertaining, and she did far more so-called mainstream things than she did X-rated things, although she will for always be remembered as an adult actress.
She initially got her start in modeling, and the famous story, she was the girl on the ivory snowbox,
Yes.
and that really launched her career, didn't it?
It did, yeah, and that was just serendipity. That was you couldn't have planned it better. She took the photo. She was selected by Procter and Gamble from hundreds of young women to be new model on the ivory soap ivory snow box. Ivory snow is not really a thing anymore, but it was back in the 70s. I mean, everybody had it. And it was marketed mostly towards mothers because it was soft enough to wash a baby's clothes in. And of course, the famous tagline is 99 and 44 100% pure. And she was selected from hundreds of other young models, and she took a picture holding a smiling baby, and the executive told her it's going to take about 2 years to take the old picture off the box and the new picture, put your picture on the box. And she took the photo around 1970. She's only about 17 when she took it. And it happened to come out, the new box, the same week as Behind the Green Door. And, nobody planned that. That was just dumb luck. And the Mitchell brothers, who made the film, were very savvy marketers, and they knew they had bombshell of a story on their hands. But wisely, instead of going immediately to the press because the box had just been released, they wanted to make sure that all of the boxes were on the supermarket shelves. Because a product recall would be way too expensive, even for Procter and Gamble, which is still around. And so they waited several months before they went to the press with the story. And it really just exploded. I always say it seems kind of quaint now to think that the mother on a laundry detergent box, who's also in an X-rated film, would cause such a controversy. But 50 plus years ago, that was a major scandal, and it really turned her into an international celebrity virtually overnight.
You just mentioned something which I had not realized. It's been that long. It's been 50 years, over 50 years
Over 50 years,
since
yeah.
Behind the Green Door came out.
Yeah. Yeah, it came out in 72, just a couple months after Deep Throat. And Deep Throat opened in New York in Times Square, the old Times Square, back the grungy, you know, uh, version that doesn't exist anymore. And Green Door opened in San Francisco. Those were the two major cities for producing adult films of that time.
What impressed me about her, well, first off, I mean, she grew up a lot of the stereotypical view of adult film actresses. I mean, she didn't like to be called a porn actress, did she? She
No.
liked the term adult film actress.
Yeah.
And the stereotypical view is that they grew up in troubled lives. They were run away from home. They had nowhere else to turn. That's why they are doing pornography. But Marilyn wasn't. I mean, she had a rather nice Midwestern upbringing, didn't she?
Yeah, well, she was a New England girl, and
New England.
she grew up in Connecticut, Westport, Connecticut, which is a very Tony town then and now, and it catered a lot to families. A lot of this was in the 50s, so mostly the fathers would take the train every day to New York City, just like her dad did. He was an advertising executive on Madison Avenue in New York City, and then they would take the train back. And so Westport catered to a lot to people who commuted into the city, into Manhattan. And she had an older brother and sister. Her mother worked not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She was a very austere woman. Probably had more in common behaviorally with Marilyn than, which is probably why they butted heads in Marilyn's teen years and even throughout her life. But they were considered upper middle class. Paul Newman lived in town in Westport. Like it produced a number of celebrities, and it's so this was not you know, she did not come from some broken home, and that broken home led her to pornography. She had no intention of doing pornography. She wanted to be a serious actress, and she thought doing this film Behind the Green Door might, um, you know, uh, lead to something bigger. And in a way it did, and in many ways it did not. So, it was a blessing and a curse doing that film.
One of the stories you relate in your book is that she wanted to get the part of George C. Scott's daughter in the movie Hardcore,
Yeah.
but they told her she didn't look slutty enough, I guess is the
Yeah,
colloquial term.
pretty much. Yeah. So Hardcore was a film written and directed by Paul Schrader, this was in 1978, 79. He had just done Taxi Driver. So he was, big guy in Hollywood, and he wrote the screenplay for that. And uh, the story of Hardcore was about a pious businessman, um, played by George C. Scott, whose daughter is kidnapped and forced into the world of pornography, very much aligned with what we were just talking about, that broken homes, that there are women are, especially women, were forced into it. That no Why would anyone choose to go in it? Which couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, there were many women of that era who willingly went into the adult entertainment industry because they wanted to, and she auditioned for the role of this prostitute slash porn star who befriends George C. Scott and connects him to people to help him find his daughter, and becomes a surrogate daughter in the process. And when she went in for the casting call, the casting director said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we can't use you." And she said, "Why?" And he said, "Because you don't look enough like a porn star." And they had a very she was just flummoxed, and she said, well, that's ridiculous. I'm the biggest porn star in the world. And she was at that time. And they said, "Yeah, well, you're just too wholesome." And she was. And she said, "Well, that's why I'm so big, because you don't expect the wholesome girl to be, a porn star." And, but that was, as I say in the book, the paradox of being Marilyn Chambers, a extraordinary stroke of luck catapulted her to stardom through this sex film. And Hollywood would not give her a chance, or did not give her many chances. And when the chances came along, when she auditioned for the role of a porn star, she was considered too wholesome to be one. So it was baffling and frustrating, and you know, major success was just always outside of her grasp. So yeah, that happened quite a few times.
She was initially spotted for Behind the Green Door. I don't think I think you said it's not because she did so well in the audition, but because someone noticed she had a real strong resemblance to the actress Sybil Shepherd, who had just done The Last Picture Show.
Yes. So Marilyn went to she saw an ad for a want ad in the San Francisco Chronicle. It said now casting for a major motion picture. Said nothing about it being X-rated. And she called and they said, "We've already cast all the parts." And she said, "Oh, please, please, come on, let me come down." Said, "Okay, it probably won't do you any good." And she went down and she got this weird vibe, and was filling out the application. And one of the questions was, "Do you want a bawling or a non-bawling role?" And she, I think, wanted it to say, "Do you want a bowling or a non-bowling role?" That was the story she told. Um, and so she said, "Yeah, I can bowl." So she circled bowling when she thought it meant bowling. And when they said, "Oh, so you'll be having sex in the film," she said, "No, absolutely not." And as she was leaving, the Mitchell brothers were in their second floor office and they noticed her and they thought, "Wow, that looks exactly like Sybil Shepherd." And they were planning Behind the Green Door, and they knew in that moment that that kind of wholesome, sun-kissed look of the early 70s, led by Sybil Shepherd, you know, was what was needed for the film, and also just what was popular in terms of the models of that day. Twiggy was on her way out, and more, blonde, wholesome models like Sybil Shepherd were the in thing at the time.
Had no speaking lines in Behind the Green Door, did she?
Not a single line, no. And
Yeah.
but if I don't know if you've ever seen Behind the Green Door, and I don't know if your listeners have ever seen it, or maybe they have or haven't seen it in a while, but I encourage people to see it, not because it's an X-rated film, but because it's so bizarre. It's just plays like an experimental art film. They took it to the Cannes Film Festival the first time an X-rated film was allowed in '73, and it played to rave reviews. It's just a weird film. There are sex scenes in it, of course, but it's nothing like the porn you find online today, or even of the video era in the '80s. And there's a mime act in the middle of the film, and you don't find that in too many X-rated films. Although I'm sure mime porn is a kink for someone somewhere. But
I'm
she
just wondering how that would work,
I don't know. It would be very quiet, I'm sure. It would just be, a lot of acting out and just no words. Speaking of no lines, but she had no lines, and the camera focuses a lot on her face and the faces of the people she's with. It's not a lot of insertion shots and penetration. There's some, but it's really about their eyes and their facial expressions and how they communicate through their bodies. And the Mitchell brothers were going for a piece of art. They really believed that this would make them, auteurs as far as filmmakers go. And uh, it definitely put them on the map, but they really didn't make anything as close to artistic or surreal as Behind the Green Door ever again. But no, she doesn't say a single thing in the film.
Mhm. One of the stories that came out of the film, and you mention it in your book also, is that she fainted during one of the sex scenes,
Yes.
and it was an interracial sex scene, which for 1972 was groundbreaking in itself.
Mm.
Um, but the actors thought that he had killed her.
Yeah, Johnny Keys was he played he didn't even have a name, they just called him the Black Stud Behind the Green Door. And he was a professional actor. He was in Hair and traveled in different theatrical productions, and it was a boxer, and just had a lot of stamina. And during one of the scenes, just went on for much longer than I think she was prepared for, and fainted. And you're right that this was the first time, because when people went to see Deep Throat, Green Door, Devil and Miss Jones, it wasn't just the raincoat crowd, the old guys. It was young couples. It was older couples. It was couples who had been married for, 50 years. Everyone went to see these three films in particular. It was the thing to do. They called it porno chic. And for many, probably most, this was the first interracial hardcore sex scene that a mass mixed gendered audience had ever seen. And so it really broke ground in that respect. No one had ever seen that before. And Johnny Keys, the actor, got death threats from the KKK and had to have security detail after the film blew up. And it was so the outcome, or I should say, some of the things that happened as a result, are not too surprising, sadly. But the idea that people went to see a film that contained a hardcore interracial sex scene and they had never seen anything like that before was, groundbreaking is an overused word, but it really was. It was groundbreaking. No one had, it rode that wave, and gave people, not just mime kink, but lots of other things that they just weren't expecting to see.
I mentioned at the beginning of the interview that she had a head for business on her shoulders, and now she negotiated her contract, which she got a very high salary right off the bat. I believe it was what, $25,000
Yeah, the
in
the numbers have
1972.
differed, and the contracts are there's one contract that exists in a private collection, but it does not mention any sum. What she got an incredibly high salary for actresses of that period. It's either $2,500 or $25,000. And either way, most people were paid $50, $100 for a day's work. Um, the women earned more than men. It's still one of the industries in which women earn more than men. And she did it as a way to get out of even participating in it, because she liked the Mitchell brothers, but she thought, I really can't do this.
Hmm.
Um, and she thought, well, I'll ask for some obscene amount of money, and I'll ask for a percentage of the gross, not the net, the gross. And, you know, the Mitchell brothers said, don't call us, we'll call you. And she said, oh, that worked. I got out of it. But an hour later, she got a phone call from the Mitchell brothers, and they said, we're prepared to give you everything you want because you're exactly what we need for the film. And they called her bluff. And she was um, very stubborn. She was a Taurus. She liked to think she was, a true Tauran. And she said, okay, I'm going to make this the sexiest motion picture it could ever be. And maybe it will lead to other stuff. And it did. And So she went through with it and lived off the residuals for many, many years, just from Green Door, because in some cities it played for, in one Wisconsin city, it played for 6 years consecutively. And it just was everywhere. So she it was a lot of luck, a lot of just being in
Yes.
the right place at the right time.
Now she wanted, and yes, she was known as an adult film actress. She tried desperately to break into what I want to call traditional mainstream films, and even went back on stage.
Yeah.
Tried to get on Broadway, I believe. Um, but that picture, Green Door, was so big, and then her follow-up, I believe it was Resurrection of Eve,
Hmm.
was also a success.
Yes.
That she was more or less pigeonholed
Yes.
into that adult film world.
Yes. And she made a valiant effort to try to be taken seriously as an all-around entertainer. And her she came close a few times, and she did cabaret shows, she did an off-Broadway musical. She had opportunities to she of course, the most famous non-X-rated film she did was called Rabid, that was directed by David Cronenberg, a horror film which is considered a cult classic, which was a box office hit back in 77 and earned her good notices. And David Cronenberg, who I interviewed for the book, just remembered her so fondly and loved working with her. Um, but she tried, and she did stage plays. She did, a Vegas staging of Neil Simon's Last of the Red Hot Lovers. Like, this was not, a High School Musical. These were, it was dinner theater, but it was good practice for her to hone her skills. And but she just could never get over that barrier of being a porn star. And so finally she made the decision with her manager and husband, Chuck Trainer, and said, you know what? If no Hollywood offers are coming in and everyone thinks I'm a porn star, I will give them the biggest porn star they've ever seen. And she did in 1980 a film called Insatiable, which is probably her most famous after Green Door, and that was a humongous hit in the early 80s and launched the video era. Theaters were on their way out, adult theaters, and home entertainment was on its way. And so she was very lucky in terms of being in the right place at the right time at the start of this, or during the sexual
Yeah.
revolution, the porno chic movement, the home entertainment boom, especially in the United States, cable television. She did a lot. And but she'll always, people just remember her for the X-rated stuff.
And she never apologized for it. She said, "This is what I do."
Yeah, she liked being objectified and, adored by men, and she did not see that as anything derogatory. And, in a way, we're all put here as human beings to be attractive to one another. And so, you know, for many of women in adult film in that during that time, they said, of course I want to be, a sex object because I want to be desired. And who doesn't want to be desired? Who doesn't want to be,
Yeah.
thought of as sexy um and beautiful and attractive? And she was. So she never apologized for it. Although in her later years, she said, I don't know if I would have done things exactly the same, but she had a lot of fun. And, she did
Yeah.
something that very, very few other women in entertainment have done, and did it for an incredible length of time when living with the still existent double standards of misogyny and sexism and ageism in entertainment and show business for women in particular. She had an incredibly long, successful career, and
Yeah.
very few women, even in Hollywood, who non-X-rated actresses can say that.
How did you get interested in Marilyn Chambers?
Well, when I was about 13, I went snooping in my grandfather's dresser drawer for adult material, and I found it in the form of a VHS. It was Marilyn Chambers' Private Fantasies #2, and my grandparents weren't home, so I watched it, and I was instantly drawn to her. I didn't know the phrase star quality, but that's what she had, and it was palpable through even through a videotape. And then I would hear her name, this was in the 90s, referenced on television shows, usually as a punchline. And it occurred to me even then, wow, this woman must be really famous. And that's kind of weird for someone I just saw in an X-rated film to be so well known. And there's still only a few handful household name, X-rated stars. And then in 2011, I went to see, I live in San Francisco, and went to see Resurrection of Eve. I had never seen it before, and I went out purely out of my fondness for her. It was playing at a museum here. And a similar thing happened in the theater that happened when I saw her on that videotape. Something was just magnetic about her. And I thought, I need to find out everything I can about this woman. And now, 13 years later, I have a book.
You get what? Are you working on another book?
I do have another book. It's in the very early stages of scoping it out and researching, and I haven't even written the proposal yet, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but it will be nonfiction. I consider myself a biographer more than anything, and so it will be a biography. And it's definitely pop culture related. So I like being in that realm. That's very comfortable, and I have a deep passion for it. So yeah, but who knows when it'll be out.
Mhm. Well, I hope to have you back on the show when that book does come out.
Thank you. I would love to. Yes.
The author's name is Jared Stearns, and the book is Pure: The Sexual Revolutions of Marilyn Chambers. And it's out now, isn't it?
Yes, people can get it at headpress.com, which is the publisher, or you can get it anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. But I'm also a big proponent of independent local bookstores. So support your local bookstore. If they don't have it, they can certainly order it.
Brick and mortar stores. You gotta love them.
Absolutely. Yes.
Jared, again, thank you for being on Lights Camera Author tonight.
Thank you.